some of the best salesmen in the world. They talk much, much less than they have the person they're selling to talk. Their lives are crazy. They just lost someone that's irreplaceable. They're dealing with lawyers. They're dealing with courts. They're dealing with, the register of deeds, just all these things that are new, foreign, and kind of cloud what the next step is forward. By directing these conversations and having them kind of, spill their guts to me, I'm getting a better and clearer picture of what they need, what's actually happening for them, what those pain points are. And it's giving me direction on how I can help them in the future and when this deal may come to fruition.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Evergreen Marketing Podcast by Carrot.com, where we help investors build businesses of freedom and impact by dialing in your lead gen and your follow-up to help you close more deals. I'm your host, Brady, and today I got a new friend with me, Micah from USLeadList.com. Did I get that right, Micah?
It's close. We own that domain to USLeadList.com, but we have plural as well, so it's all good.
Sweet.
It'll land in the same place.
Nice. So USLeadList. I wanted to have Micah on because I've only done 1 or 2 episodes specifically on probate. And I love when I get a chance to talk to someone who's super niche and really focused on one specific area of lead gen. And so, Micah, you work with investors all over the U.S., specifically on probate leads, how to get the leads, what list to pull, and really the nuances of how to follow up and care for these leads in the best way possible that serves the sellers well. So I want to dive into that. It's a very nuanced, very specialized thing, and hopefully you guys get a lot of value out of this. But Micah, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks so much for having me. Pleasure.
Yeah, it's going to be a good episode. It's going to be a good one. Everybody, real quick, before we dive into probate leads and where to find them, a tip that actually works. So we're talking about lead quality today, and when you're generating leads at scale, when you have a bunch of leads coming in, and say into your CRM, over time, it can get hard for you or your acquisitions team to know what to focus on, what to prioritize, instead of just calling and emailing every single lead or putting everybody in the same follow-up sequence. So that's one of the reasons we put an AI-powered lead scoring tool into Carrot CRM in the last year. So it's just a really quick and easy way to say at a glance, okay, is this lead worth following up against? A quick and easy way to look at all the leads in your CRM and say, okay, which ones do I need to focus on first based off of certain criteria like their level of motivation, equity in the mortgage, things like that. It's really good. And you can tweak it so the algorithm works for you. So if you're not looking at lead scoring in your CRM, that's something you might want to check out inside Carrot CRM. That being said, Micah, let's get into probate, man. You're the probate dude. I had a guy, care member Brad Woodall on the podcast probably a couple months ago now, and Brad Woodall is crushing it with probate leads, but he's generating most of them. In fact, I think all his leads from inbound, from SEO. And so he's built out video libraries. He's kind of coined himself as the probate guy, and he's getting all these leads organically, which is great. But other people want to know, okay, if I'm not getting leads through SEO yet, or I'm not doing that much work, what are some of the other ways I can get leads? So you do a lot of this. What are you doing for lead gen?
Yeah, I mean, so at its core, this is a problem, the main problem that my company solves. So, basically we aggregate all this data. We input, the data inputs is when someone passes away. So we get it from 7 different places, kind of compile that, deduplicate it, and then we overlap that with real estate ownership. And so specifically, the product that we provide, we call it the inheritance list because it's not probate specific. Probate, as some may or may not know, it's the legal process to basically disperse the assets of a person who passed away. And when you're doing it based on death, that's actually before probate happens. And so when we're kind of generating this data, there isn't any probate status yet that hasn't started typically. And so that's the data that I'm typically using. I'm starting. So someone passes away, they own real estate. And there's kind of 4 main groups that, fall into the inheritance list. So there's the pre-probate, that's before probate started, surviving spouses, trusts, and then the last is interfamily transfers before the death. And so you kind of get all that mashed together in like a monthly subscription. So that's, I speak in that manner because that's what I use for my marketing data. That's the input, but that's what inheritance list is. So yeah, basically I take that data and I do a lot of direct mail. I really like direct mail. That's very much my preference to any marketing. It's one, proven to be the highest ROI channel with this list specifically. But then I also cold call, and that's more of just squeezing the fruit to get all the juice.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're doing direct mail, so one, thanks for correcting me because I'm thinking just probate in my head, but you're actually a couple steps ahead of probate in a few different areas. So who are you? Are you direct mailing just the inherited properties, like just those addresses, or family members of them?
Not family members. So basically, what I do in my campaigns is I market to the surname and I mail it to the mailing address of the target property. So, John Johnson on 123 Main Street, I send a letter that says the Johnsons, and their mailing address may be obviously different than their actual property address. So that's who I'm sending that letter to. I don't want to be, John Johnson specific, because one, that touches a pain point, and then two, a relative, someone else who may be in charge of that estate, paying the bills, doing all those things. They may not feel like, oh, I can't open this personal letter, because I send very personalized letters. They look like something out of a Hallmark aisle. And so I always, make it a little more broad and include the whole family.
Okay, interesting. That was going to be my next question. Is like, what are the best mail pieces look like? I'm curious about like the nuances in the messaging of how you're reaching out to probate leads, since it's such a sensitive, or inheritance properties, because it's such a sensitive thing.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's where a lot of people get hung up, right? It's like, how do I insert myself into this situation? That's a really common question that I kind of deal with when I'm training clients or even just talking to people about my marketing. So, my messaging and what feels good for me and what helps me sleep comfortably at night is, basically I don't talk about the death, and none of my marketing am I, kind of focusing on that. I just market to them as if they're any other lead. But, I make some small tweaks. In my first letter, for example, I'm not even asking to buy the property. I just want to call. So what I say in my messaging is, hey, I have a question about your property. Can you give me a call? Thanks, Micah. And I leave a number. That does a couple of things for me. It jumps my response rates to almost unheard of levels. Like in my area, Midwest gets pretty good callback rates from direct mail. Percent and a half, something like that. But to that marketing piece, I'm getting, I'm expecting 12%, but oftentimes I'm getting more than that. So really high response rate. And yeah, you have to triage, but for me, and our like data shows that like half of these people are going to transact on their property. They're going to sell to someone that may be someone in their family, but 13% of those people call me back. Half of those people that I talk to are going to sell within the next 2 years. And so it warrants just a little bit different conversation. So you're talking about the kind of the AI scoring and all of those things. It's like, if data suggests that like, 1 and 2 are going to sell, I treat those leads a little bit differently. I don't mind putting in more time. I don't mind having a longer conversation and doing a lot more exploring around what their problems are and how I can be a solution to them.
Okay, nice. And so when you're saying like, I have a question about the property, are you doing that? You're doing that on the direct mail piece and in cold calls? Or is there
Not
cold
as
calling
much
a
on the
little
cold
different?
calls. Normally, when we're cold calling, it starts relatively generic, like most cold calls do. Hey, my name is Micah. I'm a local investor. I'm just curious if you thought about selling your property. Silence. From there, it's yes, no, or maybe. And even on the nose, when I'm calling this list, I'm like, oh, okay, hey, that's no problem if you're not interested in selling right now. Would you mind if I just followed up in the future? I'm asking permission. Again, like I wouldn't do this on any other list, but since I know that a really large share of these people are going to transact, and because death, probate, and all the logistics that kind of follow all of that, that person could be telling me the absolute truth in that moment, And then the next day something happens and they are 100% the, most motivated seller on my list. And so I like to open that, more conversations in the future loop as much as I can. So even if they're saying no, I'm still asking to just reach out, follow up. And if I'm doing that right, and you'll kind of hear more about like my tone and how I'm trying to connect with these people. The connection, kind of being of service to them, getting them to know, like, and trust me are some of the biggest factors I've found in being successful in this list. And so, the whole time I'm kind of, teaching people who work with me and teaching my acquisition agents, like, handle them with gloves. You want to hear their stories. You want to open up conversations. You want to understand their situation, because the more you know, the better you can solve their problem.
Yeah. What are some of the ways you break down barriers with people and build that trust really quickly, especially when they're potentially in a really odd spot?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's nothing new or surprising, but normally how I do it in a strategic fashion is, when I get them on the phone or I'm at an appointment, whatever it may be, I just ask open-ended questions to start. If they say they might sell or they're going to sell, it's like, well, what's the situation? They can't say yes or no to that, and I don't want them to say yes or no. I want them to start elaborating. And if you look at like some of the best salesmen in the world, they talk much less than they have the person they're selling to talk. They're asking questions that focus their attention on specific things. And so I want to just keep this person talking, elaborating, telling me what's happening. Like I said, their lives are crazy. They just lost someone that's irreplaceable, right? They're never going to get them back. And usually there's a big void there. Not always, but usually. And the other thing that's happening is they're dealing with logistics that they've likely never dealt with in their entire life. They're dealing with lawyers, they're dealing with courts, they're dealing with, the register of deeds, just all these things that are new, foreign, and kind of cloud what the next step is forward. And so by directing these conversations and having them kind of, for lack of a better phrase, spill their guts to me, I'm getting a better and clearer picture of what they need, what's actually happening for them, what those pain points are. And it's giving me direction on how I can help them in the future and when this deal may come to fruition.
I got a couple of questions.
Sure.
I'm curious how many of these leads end up listing with an agent, and then how many end up working with an investor, whether you close them or not. At what point and how do you position yourself as like, hey, here are your options, or here's how I could help versus an agent?
Yeah, I mean, so in my partnership that I work everything locally, I have a partner who's an agent. So we actually offer both ends of that sword.
I love that.
And I like keeping everything in house, right? I like having a solution to every problem. And so it's like,
firm believer in that. Like if you're just pigeonholing people, no, like you got to try to solve every angle.
Exactly. It's like, I'm not an agent. I don't deal with any of that, but I still get a commission or a part of that commission when I forward that on to my partner. So like, that's great. That works well. Funds more, lead, just more marketing dollars. So as far as percentages, I don't know. I would say a good amount of folks end up listing with an agent. That's very much a thing. And so, there's a lot of really nice homes that's just like, there's no, implicit motivation other than like, there's no one alive to live there anymore. It doesn't need any work. Usually a lot of these properties, I would say the majority of them, they're already paid off, right? They don't have a mortgage, so they're not like feeling the weight of finances. So a good amount of them do end up listing with an agent. On the flip side, like, a property, I was just texting with the seller right before this. I've literally been driving past this house for like the last 13 years. It's right down the road from my place. The guy called me from my list, and as soon as he started talking about the property, before he even told me the address, I was like, I know this place. I know this place because I drive by it. I've been thinking about like getting a hold of this person, like driving for dollars that I never took initiative on. And so like, it's been abandoned. They had a second, another house, right down the road. This thing's just been sitting here collecting dust. It's got a hole in the roof. It basically needs a full rehab. So scenarios like that are like frequent enough where I'm, it justifies my marketing dollars. On average, my return on ad spend, specifically direct mail, because that's the most expensive, I'm seeing a 7 to 8% or 7 to 8x return on my marketing.
That's awesome. 7 to 8 ROI. That's crazy, man. Yeah, I love how, I know I already said this, but I love how you're offering like, hey, here's your option for selling with an agent. Here's what it's like working with me. I really appreciate that. I think trying to pigeonhole someone is really just like doing a disservice to sellers, especially people in this situation. That's really cool. So, let's talk about, where to find these leads. If you could give me like some people are going to want like the DIY scrappy free way to get some of these leads. And some people are going to be like, heck, I don't have time for this. Let me just work with Micah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if someone wanted to go kind of the free route, they've got time, but not money, like, low hanging fruit probate records. You can get those at, courthouses, most, most counties or, whatever jurisdiction, they'll have those online. So you can get those pretty relatively easy. So that is one route where you're basically approaching the same person. In some ways, like there's some kind of components there that make it a little easier. You know exactly who to talk to. You're talking either to the executor, you're talking to the, the representative, and you can have a conversation. You can kind of track those people down, skip trace them, call them, direct mail, whatever you want to do. So in that instance, you would be mailing, the executor or calling them. Another route you could go, and this would take a little more manual research, is start looking at obituaries. So if you go to like legacy.com, you can, look, there's a, good amount of obits on there all over the nation. So you can sort it by state, by city, and you can go through. The challenge though is like, not every one of those people is going to own real estate. And then you kind of have to build, okay, this person lived in this city. So I usually, if I was doing this manually, I would go on True People Search. So go on True People Search, see, type that person's name in, the city, state, see if you can find their address. And then, real cheap, easy way to kind of index property records, property ownership is a website called Regrid. I don't know if you're familiar. But $10 gives you nationwide access to any property owners across the U.S. So you could go on there, type the address in, and see if there's a match on the ownership. Because so you're going from obit record to basically personal database. So you're trying to connect to that individual, and then the last leg is you're trying to figure out, do they own the real estate or the property where their current mailing address is. So if you get through all those steps, then you've got a positive indicator there, and you can start your marketing from there.
Yeah. So it's definitely a lot of, it's steps. Like you can get the leads for free at the start, but it's definitely a lot of like footwork to filter them out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can see why going to somebody with a list like you makes a lot of sense. And even then, if you were to start, I'm just thinking aloud, like if you were to start marketing that list without refining it too much, you're probably wasting money on your direct mail because you're just blasting a wider list and you don't know exactly who has property, who has equity, who's primed to sell.
Right. Yep. That's exactly right.
Interesting. One other thing I wanted to ask about the mail piece, you said it looks like a Hallmark card. Like what's the aesthetic of the card? What do you do there of the
I've got a return one here like that. And that's very much something that's a whole other kind of niche within the niche. But so let me go over. This is a A2 letter, linen colored. It's a handwritten font. We use a real first class decorative stamp on there. And they just look classy. It's not cheap direct. It's not that, standard business letter. It's funny. So many people, one of the easiest metrics to measure in direct mail is cost, right? And so you're shopping through all the vendors and you're like, wait, this person's got, I can send, a cheap postcard for 53 cents if I just get up to, 5,000 records. It's like, that's okay. Like do the math, but understand cheap direct mail gets you cheap responses. It gets you a lower response rate. And, ultimately at the end of the day, and everyone knows this, and it'll be obvious once I say it, but we all have a junk mail sniff test, right? When we go to the mailbox and we open the mailbox and we're like, okay, junk. Ooh, what's this? So anytime that you're crafting a direct mail piece, you want it to feel tangible. You want it to feel real. You want it to feel interesting, like to get someone to open it up, focus their attention on it. And with this list, especially, like I was already discussing, their heads are full of like, all these logistics, pain. So for me, it's helpful to have a nicer piece because it's going to cut through that, all that kind of cloudiness and be like, just grab them. I don't do handwritten letters, but if you can, handwritten letters, there's nothing better. So that's the ultimate. If you have a time, you find some, teenage kids who are willing to do that for you as a service. That's going to be your best way to get in front of these people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I don't have data to back this up, but like when you're going through something stressful, when your head's in the sand, like your tolerance for junk mail is much lower. Like you're just tossing
Absolutely.
everything. If you're even looking at it or opening it,
Mhm.
sometimes people just let that stuff pile up.
That's exactly right.
Interesting. Okay, so we talked about what list to pull. Anything else as far as like tips for targeting or what the mail should look like? Anything else you can think of?
I mean, targeting, you and I both know, being kind of in the lead gen space, is that not all leads are the same, right? And one of my favorite segments of this list, it's, when they own more properties than just their house. So, that's one of the things that we add to our list is like, do they own any other real estate other than their home? And so having a conversation with someone who, someone in the family who just lost someone who owns a portfolio of 10 rentals is totally different than someone who just has a single property to sell. And so, for me, like in my own metrics, I went back last year and looked just because I was curious. But so this is a crazy number. 60% of my net revenue came from people who had more than one property. 60%. The other 40%, those were all single family one-off homes that I ended up transacting with. And last year I did have a couple unicorns. I had, my largest wholesale ever, which was $250,000. It was a development play. So that was unusual. But that did help. But I had another, multiple six-figure deal where, this guy sold us some properties on seller finance, and then we rehab each of them and then sold them off. And so, it was interesting to see that number. And so I really focus harder on marketing to those people who have more than one property. I want to have conversations with them more. Basically, how I treat them is I want to basically befriend them. I want them to think of me once they decide to sell. I want them to know, like, and trust me, and trust that like I'm going to be the guy that handles it. And so, basically, we go through, we'll call them more and we'll mail them more, just to get their attention.
Nice. Are you using like any tracking phone numbers, or you just use one phone number on the postcards?
We use one phone number on the post. I did get a little more geeky about that before, but like for me, like, and I guess to the point, the amount of leads that were coming out, I don't do enough metrics around that. So, and I should. How we were doing separate ones is when I was in kind of multiple states, and so that kind of just helped me spread out who's what where, and then it helped me tie it back to the leads that were coming in.
Nice. Do you and I'm not looking for like right or wrong answers. I just know everyone has like their flavor of direct mail or what they like to put on the postcards and letters. So like some people will put their email address on there, Do you put email address or website or like QR code or anything like that, or just super like
very, very basic? I mean, so, and I haven't tested that, and I should play around with it more. I do email marketing. I do cold email to this list as well, but that's a separate channel of marketing. On the letters, I'm just doing phone number. The aggregate age of people on this list is 75. And so in general, they're not the most tech savvy people. Like I'm thinking of my dad right now, and he's just like,
yeah.
how do you get Zoom to work? He's like got the camera pointed at the ceiling. And so in general, I try and just keep it as simple as possible, direct, kind of familiar, like, give me a call.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Yeah. I'd be curious to, if it were me and I were doing it at scale, I'd want to be like using a tracking phone number, send it to my Carrot CRM so I could like have the transcripts and have the data from those calls, analyze them afterwards, and to know, that they came from that campaign versus like a website lead or something else. So I would think I'd want to separate that. And then I'd be curious to see like, QR code might be too much for the age demographic, but even just like, the homepage of the website or a specific page for like, hey, here's a free resource. Or if you want to learn more about us, just go to like, micahbuyshouses.com/about, something like that.
Right.
Just
Right.
I don't know. Just
Yeah,
to see
that's
what
an interesting
happens.
play. Yeah, I think I'll pick your brain on other ideas around that. That's not a
Yeah.
bad thought.
We get a lot of care members. I mean, I hear probably more than 50% of people I talk to, like, will use their website on the direct mail in some way, shape, or form. And it's different. We're talking about like a postcard with a QR code on the bottom, like mass mailings. I hear a lot of that, but also in the follow-up sequences, like, hey, here's our about page, or hey, here's a case study testimonial that we did with a seller recently. So I don't know. I'd be curious to see how that would work and test it. Okay, so email marketing or emailing leads cold. I don't hear a lot about that. Tell me about what you're doing there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so what we're basically doing is we're setting up a bunch of separate accounts. The hard thing about email marketing, right, is like you don't want to get pushed to the spam
Yeah.
box. So
It's getting the algorithms and the spam filters are getting so advanced, too advanced. I get like too many emails are going to spam that shouldn't.
exactly. Yep.
It's a battle.
It really is. Yeah. And it's like, it's really frustrating when you get a highly pertinent email and it's in your spam and it's been there for several days.
Yeah.
And so, that's the biggest battle here. And so, it all kind of comes down to clean data. So, getting your emails, that is a part of our list. We have that, but you need to make sure that you're going through, making sure that they're actually live, being used, basically like, email boxes that are triggered to kind of let the spam algorithm know that like, hey, they emailed this person, blacklist them right away. So you want to go, sure, just make sure all of your emails are clean. There's a bunch of services for that. But then from there, there's a few different cold email services you can use. Smart Lead AI is who I use. And we're basically just setting up a really simple sequence to these people. So, I've got a bunch of accounts. They're sending maybe 30 emails a day. And it's just kind of cycling through the list. It's importing variable factors such as their name. We could do properties, but we really don't. We keep the emails super simple. No pictures, no, HTML really. It's just, a few, questions that we have. Just like, it follows along that first letter that I send. Just say, hey, I have a question about your property. Would you be interested in chatting? Reply to this email or shoot me a call at whatever number. Yeah. So it's not like a giant needle mover, but what I like about it is like, when they do come through, I can see they've opened this letter, this email 5-6 times. They're circling back to it. And, when I get that call, they're usually at a place where they're like, they're willing to deal. And again, it's just approaching it from a totally different angle. It's kind of like direct mail in a way where, it's just sitting there waiting for them to interact with it. And, having metrics around, seeing when they're opening it, like that's really useful to know, like, oh, okay, they've opened this 4 times. Maybe I need to send them another email that goes into a smaller subset or something. But, again, it's just kind of like squeezing the lime for all it's worth. You've got all this data, you've got all this information. I know it's a little bit different on the, I guess, digital marketing side, but if you work with data, you've got cold callers or whatever, like, there's different places where you can get stuff skip trace, where you can just get the email and it's not necessarily extra. So, and, setting all of it up, maybe, I don't know. I'm probably like $300-400 in, and I'm usually getting at least 5 or 6 good leads over, the month. And like, for me, like that's a no brainer.
Probably one of the cheapest marketing things you can get.
Yeah. And, I can keep on going, it doesn't cost me hardly anything to send. So I can just keep on repinging these same people.
Right.
My list keeps on growing. And it's a little bit of a headache to get it set up, but absolutely worth it once it's all there.
Yeah, I'm really curious because like I'm not an active investor. I'm not reaching out to sellers every day, but I do a little bit of cold pitching. Excuse me, just for guest podcast pitching to go on other podcasts.
Sure.
So a lot of the same like methods and psychology. How many times are you following up until you stop emailing, and how often?
We're basically hitting it. It kind of varies because as my list grows, my amount of sends kind of goes down. So it's kind of this battle. Like I'll add more sending accounts, and I also get more more data. And so I would say we're hitting them once a month, and we're just kind of changing iterations on that messaging. I'm not pushing super hard, but I'm touching, I don't know, it's got to be close to 10,000 inboxes a month now, just kind of on reoccurring.
Yeah. Interesting. I would have thought like more sooner, like maybe every 3 to 7 days or weekly in the beginning, and then space it out further.
Well, it's harder because my sending limits are directly tied to how many sending accounts I have. So if you're doing it the way that I'm doing, you could just load them all into, whatever. So, I don't know, Clavio. Actually, I don't think they would let you, but there's some kind of more gray hat email senders. And you could just email everyone in a blast. That's not what we're doing here. We're taking, separate accounts. They're sending on average 30 emails a month. And so it takes a long time for it to kind of circulate through all of those. Not 30 emails a month, 30 emails a day. So it takes a long time to circulate through that list.
Okay. That makes sense. Have you ever tried, I haven't tried this. I'm just curious. Have you ever tried anything like, when you're done reaching out, like, hey, if it's not the right time to sell, just save my email. Feel free to give me a call anytime. I'm here to help.
No ultimatum email yet. But maybe once my list gets a certain point where I'm like, okay, I got to push some off so I can focus on what I think is better. That is actually a good move. I like that.
Yeah. I'd be curious, because you hear about it all the time. Like, oh, I saved your direct mail piece. I got your postcard like 2 years ago, and I've had it in my junk drawer.
Right.
Probably an email version of that.
Totally. Yeah. Not a bad idea. I like
Cool,
it.
man.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah. Well, this has been really valuable. I appreciate you giving out a lot of good nuggets. Hopefully I didn't leave anything out for our listeners. Guys, if you have complaints or there's a question I missed, email me, brady@carrot.com, and I will follow up with Micah. But a couple questions, and then I want to do a quick fire round before we wrap it up.
Sure.
You mentioned before we hit record, you try to approach sellers with a servant mindset. Tell me about that, and kind of what's your stance on working with sellers holistically, and like what do you want to see change in our industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important things tangibly in my life and around business, because they're so intertwined, is like I want to feel comfortable and good when I go to sleep at night, right? I don't want to have to feel like I'm lying or like telling half truths. Like for me in my business, it's really important that I tell the truth, right? It's really easy to keep track of. I don't have to, modify, change my message individually for these people and then, get caught with my pants down.
Yeah.
And so I just like telling the truth. With this list specifically, like I'm not telling them, hey, I got this list of dead people and now I'm mailing them. That's not what I do.
Yeah.
I send them letters and I just reach out to them like I would any other seller. And, if they're curious how I got their information, I kind of lead with breadcrumbs. Like, again, they're older, so they may not be familiar with what skip tracing is. It's like, let's say I'm cold calling, like, oh yeah, we got your number from county records. And then we went to this crazy website called True People Search. And I've had people on the phone go and look up their names on True People. They're like, oh my gosh, I just had no idea anything like this existed. And like, it's that little shift. All of a sudden, like instead of I'm a stranger, I'm like an advocate for truth, right? I'm telling them what's happening. I'm telling them the reality. And then, the service mindset is like, money isn't the most important thing for me. And I think that, kind of everyone's got their own reality around that. But, doing what's right in a situation, because, with death, with, these people in hard emotional scenarios, I, talked a lot about active listening and how that conversation is like it's a business kind of, to like kind of check the box. But like, I'm not faking it. Like I am genuinely interested in these people. I care about them. Like the process of the call, it's more like I'm paying attention like a friend would listen to someone else's life story, because believe it or not, like that's oftentimes where these conversations go. They want to tell me why they're important. They want to tell me why they're significant. They want me to understand, just how great their life was. And usually it's in light of, because this person's gone, this thing that they had that is, that they loved is no longer around. And so, typically they're very reminiscent of their past, because, it's been shaken so much, because the future is kind of blurry, because the person that made their past so great is often, they're not there anymore.
Interesting. Do you find it helpful at all to talk about your experience of like, oh, I've been there. I've, had someone in my life die and that's really rough. Try to relate on that level or no? Or does that people
Yeah, I
just
mean,
gloss over
and
it?
in some ways, it hadn't really been pertinent until kind of recent. I mean, all my grandparents passed away, but I was relatively young. But about 6 months ago, my father's wife passed away. She had cancer. It happened really fast, and so it's just really interesting being kind of on the outside watching him, and then also helping him. Like he's like one of the first things he came. It's like, Micah, about real estate. What am I going to do with this condo? I don't want to live here. I'm like,
Yeah.
I just think about her all the time. I want to go. Um, and so absolutely, like as that has become just a real truth, and I see firsthand, like it's been useful to incorporate that into the message because, that's funny. Actually, my dad is literally calling me on video right now. I'm going to decline that.
Oh man, interesting. Yeah, I was just curious because I don't know. Sometimes people say like, yeah, it's worth mentioning and trying to relate to them, but I know sometimes that it can feel selfish to like a seller or somebody else. Like, oh, I don't want to hear you talk about yourself. So, yeah,
Yeah. I think that in general, you're better off focusing most of your attention on them, just making them the star of the show, right? It's like talk to them like you would, your 5-year-old who's showing you some gymnastics trick for the first time. Like, how did you do that? And you're just kind of enamored, right? Can you do this variation? And then you're just putting all of your intensity and like your mental headspace and making it available to make them feel like they're significant.
yeah, I love that, man. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah,
I'm really sorry to hear about your dad's wife. That's awful. So,
yeah, it's
feel for you.
unfortunate, but the reality is like we're all having to deal with that. We're all going to have to go through that. And so, I think for me, like that's why I talk a lot about how to treat people, how I think it's important to interact with these folks, because we're going to have to deal with it someday. I mean, we're all going to die.
I really appreciate the transparency of like, hey, here's how we get the information and leading with breadcrumbs. I actually got a call from an investor in the recent weeks, and not the investor, but someone that was cold calling for them, an assistant or a call center. And I kind of played into it. I'm not looking to sell my house, but I played into it because I want to see how this goes. I want to see what the pitch is. I'm super curious.
Yeah,
And so when I asked like, hey, how'd you guys, or what makes you think I'm interested in selling? I said something like that, or like, how'd you guys get my number? Like, why'd you call me?
right,
It was just complete deflection. And I
right.
was expecting and hoping for like, well, we're a cash buyer. We're on the lookout for people to sell, and we saw these indicators, or we found you on this list. Like, I would have appreciated that. And I don't think I'm just being biased as a guy who works for Carrot, who's a marketer, who's super curious. I'm like, isn't this what people would hope for, to just give you this straightforward answer?
Yeah,
And it was just deflected, like, well, or you think about selling? I'm like, oh my gosh, no.
right,
So
right. Yeah. And
I'm like,
well,
just tell me how you got my information.
exactly,
And build
and
the
like,
trust.
and that's what we want. We want someone to be like, tell me a truth. Like, I don't want you to deflect my answers. I want to know like what's going on here.
Yeah.
You're exactly. I don't think you're alone in that just because you're a marketer. I think
Yeah.
that very much that's a real thing that cold callers should be trained about.
That's good to hear. I appreciate you saying that, because I look at everything through a super analytical marketing lens, and
Sure.
I'm like, maybe it's just me. But no, this is how normal people think.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the investor who's listening to this, if you're listening to this and I'm talking about you, I ended up talking with the investor and the conversation went really well. I ended up talking with the investor after I talked with the cold caller.
Yeah.
And great business model, super transparent, super ethical. I was just like, the caller wasn't trained on that. And I was like, this is kind of weird, but great business model. Anyways, man, this is a good conversation. Before we wrap it up, I want to do a real quick fire round. I did not prepare you for.
Okay.
We'll shoot for about 1 or 2 minutes, quick bullet points, answers, just fire around. But we'll see if we can cram in some more value before we wrap it up. 4 questions, Micah. 1,
Okay.
What's your best piece of marketing advice for people, either a strategy or a tactic, something you love?
I mean, in this industry, follow up is king. Knowing when and who to follow up with is important, but If you are the last person talking to this after everyone's shooken out when they're finally ready to make a decision, you're going to win more often. Um, yeah. And, be compassionate. Life's hard.
Yeah, that's good. Side tangent from that, I'll pause my fake timer. How do you prioritize who to follow up with manually? What I'm saying is, like, if you got 1,000 leads to follow up with, are you going to automate all of them? Or how do you say, okay, I'm really going to focus on follow up with these leads? How do you know?
For me, like, the most critical ones, like I was talking about before, it's like, these landlords they've lost someone, they've got, 5, 3, 10 properties, 75 properties. Um, those are the people who I'm personally following up with. Automation, if I've got emails or, for everyone, I don't think that hurts. But outside of that, I don't have a great, indicator other than just like internal notes and like, what was communicated. When someone tells me to follow up, as a rule, they give me a time frame, I always cut that in half, and then, usually lean towards calling them sooner and find some reason to give them value and kind of reach out again.
Okay, that's good. I like that. Yeah, I hadn't heard that before. Just prioritizing people that have other properties, your own referrals. Okay, fake timer back on. Number 2, what's a book that changed your life? And tell me, what was the problem that it solved? Why'd you read it?
I think that, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, as cliche as that is, I read that when I was 19 or something. My mom was part of a multi-level marketing group, and that was circulating through there, and I like picked it up, and it was a good story, but it was the first kind of, I guess, pivot away from like how, like, the model American life to being kind of an entrepreneur. And I always had an entrepreneur fire, but I didn't really know how to develop it or even consider it of value until I read that book. And then from there, basically, I turned into just a, entrepreneurial addict and
Just
tried a bunch of crappy businesses that didn't work, but ultimately has led me here into real estate and helping other people do deals.
Nice, man. Nice. Okay, number 3, what advice would you give to younger Micah?
I would tell myself that there's enough time for family. There's enough time for life, and that, I really had to prioritize business when I was young. I told you this before the podcast, but I took the road to hard knocks. I skipped high school, and I had kids really young. I didn't tell you that part, but I have 4 kids now.
How old did you have your youngest kid?
I was 22.
22? Okay, I was trying to remember. We had our son when I was, I think 20, 21, maybe 22.
Okay, yeah, right in there, yeah.
I feel you. Yeah, my son, I'm 33, my son's 11.
Okay, yeah,
so 22.
And like, so, and many parts of that, having kids when you're young is awesome. You have more energy, you can play with them. But, I was behind the 8 ball, and like getting the bills paid was a really big challenge with 3 kids when I was that young. So, prioritizing family. Their money comes and goes, but your kids at the life stages that they're at never comes back.
Okay, I'm going to pause my fake timer again because I get really passionate and fired up about this topic. So we have an 11-year-old and we have a 2-year-old. I'm 33. And you've gone through entrepreneurship, building multiple businesses, trying things out, throwing spaghetti at the wall while your kids are young. How did you try to find balance, while like juggling multiple businesses and doing entrepreneurship? In other words, like, how do you know when you're working too much or not spending enough time with your family?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think there's any cut and dry way, but if you're frustrated because your kid wants to play with you because you don't have time because you're trying to make money, you're probably putting your eggs in the wrong basket. If I don't know if you don't feel like your family happiness is more important than making money, you're probably working too hard. Like, once I kind of got those things lined up, putting my family first, making the bigger sacrifice of holding the responsibility of being a stable figure in the home, because I didn't know how to do that. And part of that was, my family history. Once I figured that out, I every year I make way more money. Like I'm much more calm, I'm much more relaxed, and I make clear, more sound decisions financially that lead to, greener pastures.
Okay, that's good advice. Yeah, those red flags to watch out for. Last thing, man, is there anything you're doing outside of real estate or any impact you're making? Anything you're excited about that you want to talk about? Something that lights you up?
I love soccer. I've been coaching for the last, 12 years. So I'm coaching my middle son now. I get pretty excited about that. I think it's just the best game there is personally. And so I spend a good amount of my off time doing that. I love my business. Most of my employees in my business are actually my family. I'm from a family of 7. So my data engineer, he's my brother. My lead salesperson is my sister. So I'm very much a family first person. I think that about covers kind of the high points, things that get me excited. I couldn't be anywhere without my amazing wife. She definitely lights up my world.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to destroy my fake timer at this point. One more question, then we'll wrap it up. But on the family business front, that's super rare. Most people find it pretty challenging to work with their family. And I know this is a loaded question. There's not one straightforward answer, but like, what's been helpful for you to make that work? Because a lot of people want to work with their family or relatives at least, but it's just like, it blows up so often.
Yeah, I think where it gets challenging, right, is like there's different pay scales from owner to employee and that was the hardest thing for me to kind of divide. I grew up with nothing. My dad was a truck driver. We had very little. And so, throughout, the early part of my life, I just really I adopted a poverty mindset. And so, kind of the last stage of metamorphosis of like kind of taking off that old jacket was, when I felt, okay, it's like I own this company, I'm employing my siblings and I'm helping them feed their families now. And that was a really big, challenging thing for me to deal with. Like, I talked to them initially like they were entrepreneurs like me, but in reality, they're not. They want a job. They want to be comfortable. They want to know what their paycheck is going to be. That is nowhere in my paradigm. I'm always like, how can I, explode? I want to, 5x. I want 20x if I can. What's the risk? Okay, let me think about that. And so, yeah, just having really good communication across, what your responsibilities are, what are sacrificing to give someone else a job, and just having really good, honest, clear communication around, responsibilities, kind of all the things that, again, nothing foundational, but like good communication will solve most problems. That's what I found.
Over communicating and clear expectations.
Exactly.
Nice. Thanks for sharing, man. Yeah, I know that could be a whole topic on its own. Like people that want to work with their spouse, work with their family. Maybe that'll be a follow-up episode someday.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, before I let you go, where can people find you? Where can people follow up in case I missed it?
Let's see. I'll just drop my email. That works pretty good. My assistant checks it and she'll connect us, but it's Micah, Micah at USLeadList.com. Otherwise, Facebook is good. Micah Nicholes on there. You can reach out, send me a friend request, send me a message if you want to chat. And then otherwise, the business kind of all leads back to me. So I do all the training of our clients. I, basically give my direct number to all of, our working clients. I want, anyone who's working with us to be excited once we release and drop that next monthly list, because it means so much to them in their business. So, nice. Get a quote, check out the website, see if your area is available. I don't think I told you, we only sell every county 3 times. So there's a good amount of stuff that's sold out and not everything's available for purchase.
Nice. I love that. Keep it limited for sure.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for sharing. Thank you again for hopping on. It's good to get to know you. And thanks for just giving so much value to our listeners. I appreciate you, man.
Hey, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, everybody. If you got value out of this, share with a friend, leave a review, do all of the things. If you got questions or ideas, shoot me an email, brady@carrot.com, or hit me up on Facebook. Hop in the Facebook community. I haven't mentioned that in a while, but the Facebook community has been really active lately. If you're not in the Evergreen Marketing Facebook group, just go to community.carrot.com. We're sharing a heck of a lot of advice and strategies and giving away freebies in there every single week. If you have questions, pop them in there. I would love to chat with you. So until next time, we will see you later.